Good afternoon and welcome to Bradenton Kiwanis. My name is Neil Unruh. I'm your president. Welcome. It's great to see everyone here. Thank you for being here. Special welcome to all our guests. We'll introduce you a little later. You're in for a great program today. This time I'll have Ed Nicholas do our invocation.
Bow your heads. Jesus said to his disciples, "Let the little children come to me, for they are the kingdom of heaven." Heavenly Father, let the children come to Kiwanis. Better yet, let us go to them. Let us give them the opportunities they wouldn't otherwise get. Help us improve their lives. Help us give them the blessings that you have bestowed upon us. Bless our speaker and the amazing work that gets done over at the Bishop. Help guide him. Bless Chad Cohen, one of our guests here today. He's an amazing young man who's a former president at the Key Club at Manatee High School. Bless his journey. Bless this food to the nourishment of our bodies and our lives to thy service. In Christ we pray. Amen.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountain side, let freedom ring. Okay, please be seated. We do have a number of announcements today, so we're going to get started with those right away. Is Aaron Craig here? But are you taking over, Chad? All right, come on up, Chad. Well, okay, I'll just keep speaking loudly. It's a yellow.
What am I saying?
Oh no, you've got some Key Club
Okay.
awards.
I didn't know if you had anything else.
Nope.
Hello,
It's being updated.
I just
Just
talk.
speak loudly.
Okay, I'm used to always.
Speak loudly.
Cool. Hello, everyone. My name is Chad Cohen. Currently, I'm the district webmaster for the Florida Key Club of International. I am a past club president of Manatee High School, which you all sponsor, so thank you so much for that. So recently, I just attended the International Convention for Key Club, which was in Anaheim, California. At the convention, there's like kind of two parts. So there's a tour as well as a convention. Thank you. Well as the convention. So from the 2nd to the 5th was a convention. See, now this mic messes me up. now I hear myself.
Place it in. Place it in.
I'll just speak normally.
Keep going.
All right. Cool. So there's like two parts basically. All right, I'll just speak normally. So there's basically like two parts. So from the 2nd to the 5th, there's like a tour of LA, which you see the Griffin Observatory, the Hollywood sign, Santa Monica, LA, different parts of LA, as well as we went to Knott's Berry Farm, which is more of like a new amusement park, kind of like Busch Gardens, and then also Disneyland, which I would say Disney World is way better. Unless you're from LA, then I don't know. But so then the rest of that, there is a convention, which was from the 5th to the 9th. So there's workshops, sessions that is pertaining to, how to become an LTG, how to be a governor, how to be an icon at Icon, which that didn't make much sense to me, because you're at Icon, but I don't know. But besides that, really, there's a lot of, also a cool thing is there's trade pens. So, you get a different amount of pens from the Florida district, which is from our past district convention in April. And then you go there and tons of people from around the world have different pens and you can trade them. So special ones is like, let's say there's a Coca-Cola bottle which says Key Club on it and it's from Georgia, and everybody goes crazy about that. Or there's a little Carolina key, which is just a key, which I don't know why people go crazy about it, but and there's also a Jamaica pen. So a lot of that is just fun, interacting things that people can get along with, and a lot of communication and knowledge is being spread throughout the convention, which many may not be able to experience if you don't go there. And a lot of the information you're able to gather and bring back to your home clubs to spread, because a lot of that information is beneficial to club presidents, vice presidents, secretaries, so on and so forth. So I'm going to spread a little news from a note from the club president, which also attended, but she's unfortunately not able to be here today. So, dear Bradenton Kiwanis, thank you for sponsoring my trip to Anaheim for Key Club International Convention. The workshops and sessions were very informative and inspiring. I got to make connections with other Key Club members from around the world, and we shared ideas on how to better our home clubs and communities. Words cannot express how grateful I am to have had the opportunity. Sincerely, Lena White, 2023-2024, Manatee Key Club President. Cool. Besides that, I attended International Convention last year and this year, and without you all, that would have not been a thing I would have been able to do. I've been here a few times, and every single time I'm having more and more fun because of everybody I'm able to meet. So thank you all for supporting Manatee High School, Key Club in general, and I hope to see you all soon.
Thank you, Chad. At this time, we'll have Sharon Barhorse. Please come up. We've got a great opportunity tomorrow afternoon for something that Bradenton Kiwanis is sponsoring. So, Sharon, why don't you share some things with us?
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're super excited that we're going to have the opportunity to host an open house downstairs for the new launch of the Manatee River Kiwanis Club. Does that name sound familiar? Yeah. It should. It was 100 years ago, we started the Manatee River Kiwanis Club. So once again, we're trying to start a new legacy with this club. It's targeting families. And I wanted to give you a list of different types of groups that we think will be good Kiwanis member for this club. They're going to meet twice a week. One of the times we'll be here at the Manatee twice a month. Sorry. Did I say twice a week? Twice a week. That would be good. No. Twice a month. Thank you, Ken. Twice a month. Very active, twice a month. And it's going to be centered around families, especially families that are homeschooling their children, because they don't get a lot of the same opportunities that the rest of the children do than our regular public schools, charter schools. And then we're also seeing interests like multi-generational. Some of our retirees would like to come and interact with children and families. So this will be a good opportunity for them to do it. We also have spouses of current Kiwanis members that really didn't, want to do the typical traditional Tuesday lunch, but they love service. So this is going to be a good way for them to give service and interact with families and children. Another group, grandparents raising grandchildren. How do they get their children out into the community to be able to volunteer? So we've got some people interested in that. And we really need all of you to help spread the word. Invite them to come to the open house. It's, like I said, it's 3:30 to 5 o'clock tomorrow downstairs. You bring your kids. One of our members, Bonnie, has created these darling cards. The service project is cards that will go to children in the hospital. So the children will be doing their service project off to the left side of the lobby. Over here on the right side of the lobby, you're going to have people trying to plan and get ready to elect officers for this new club. We need your support. We need 15 brand new Kiwanis members to join this club to be an official charter. If you have any questions, you can see myself, you can see Ken, you can see Bonnie. I'm trying to think. Crystal's coming later today because Prairie obviously is here, our incoming Lieutenant Governor, to help us with the PowerPoint and help us with the launch.
We'll correct that.
What?
Don't worry.
What?
Nothing. Keep going.
What did I do? I said something wrong too?
Just keep going.
Sorry, I'm going to stop. So Freudian, what can I say? I get too excited.
Okay.
All right, I think that was everything. Again, thanks for your support. We really appreciate it.
No? Sure. Okay. So we'll actually say what Prairie is. She is the incoming governor. She is the governor-elect, which in about a month She will be the governor of our District of Florida, and her husband Jeremy will also be right in there as governor-elect after this. So please welcome Prairie Rio.
Thank you for giving me a minute to speak. Just a minute, though. I just wanted to thank you for welcoming me here, and thank you for sponsoring the new Manatee River Kiwanis Club. We're so excited for this new structure of a whole family project and activity coming together as a club. So thank you for that. I appreciate all that you're doing to the community. You're one of the strong clubs in our district, and we really appreciate all that you do.
Okay, at this time, Mike Baer with any community service announcements.
Thank you, Neil. Good day, everyone. Welcome back after a little hiatus from last week. On July 1st, we had the construction of a bat house and osprey nest project. A few of you were there. I know Mac was there. I know the scouts were there. They had a presence. And over at GT Bray, it really came out nice. They had a kickoff a few days ago for it. On August 8th, we do have the open house at Manatee Elementary, and we could use some volunteers. Jay and his group, the Good News Grill team, are going to be there, help getting those hot dogs done. But we'll need some volunteers to hand out everything. And finally, Christy on our team, along with Jay, we're planning on doing some things with the Red Cross. And I thought it would be good to have. I know it's been many years since I've been CPR trained. By show of hands, who would be interested in sticking around maybe a little bit after one of the meetings for some CPR training, just to get an idea? All right? Okay, good. We'll probably move forward with that. At some point, we'll have the Red Cross talk, and then we'll have some training afterwards. Thank you very much. Thanks, Neil.
Okay, our final announcement is that a club board meeting will be next Wednesday at noon at Fusilli's. This will be the July meeting. So those on the board or on committees, please make sure you can be there for that. We're just going to keep on rolling right into it. So Rita, why don't you come up with our guests who are here today?
Good afternoon, everyone. So, guests, when I call your name, please stand so we can give you a warm Kiwanis welcome. Our first guest is Jim Tracy, guest of Lamone Johnson. Thank you. Shannon Live, guest of Sharon Barros. Thank you. Chad Core, guest of a Key Club member. Jerry McGiddies, a guest of Steve Litzschauer. Aaron Cerveas, guest of Jennifer Abato. Of course, we've already met our incoming governor, Prairie. And Scott Savalgi, guest of Christie's. Thank you all for attending today and welcome.
Sharon, did you want to stand as a guest? Did you want to stand as a guest? Nope. Okay. All right. We're gonna move right along as a member. We're gonna move right along to our program today, so we'll get out a little early today. If I could have Mike Baer please come up and introduce our program.
Thank you, Neil. Before I introduce our speaker, everybody is familiar with the Bishop Planetarium, the Bishop, the South Florida Museum. It's been called many names through the years. In 1947, it started at the end of the pier. What was it, on Memorial Pier, I guess it was. And then just within a couple years, it moved over to the current spot. Actually, that was in 1966. 1 year after the museum started, we remember baby snoots, which became Snooty for all of us. And I looked at it. I was doing a little bit of research. Of course, Snooty passed away in 2017 at 68 years old. So 1 year after museum started, baby snoots came in. But we all know the manatees and the study and everything at the museum. So it's been great. In high school, Jay, remember we used to go over there to the Bishop Planetarium, watch the laser light shows, so everybody's done that. Today we've got Mr. Andy Sandall, appropriate name for somebody that's originally from UK, came over here. He's always worked in the beaches. Sandal as the last name, right? Pretty cool over here. And also on the East Coast. But Mr. Sandal's got some great experience, originally in native UK since 1992 as a curator at various museums, including the National Railroad Museum, the world's largest railroad museum. And then in 2004, he became executive director at the Hermitage National Historical Monument in Hohokus, New Jersey? Hohokus. Okay. And the Museum of Early Trades and Crafts in Madison, New Jersey. What's interesting in talking with Andy at the table this morning is he's a huge sports fan. So after he's been over here, he loves baseball, and he's very familiar with the intimate knowledge of all the players out there and their batting averages. But without further ado, we're very glad to have you represent the museum. Come on up, Andy. Andy Sandall.
Thank you all. Absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invite. I've now got to remember which way to move the slides forward. So I'm the new Executive Director, CEO, of the Bishop Museum of Science and Nature. I've been in post now about 4 months, and it's very heartening that I recognize so many faces and so many names in the room. All this getting out and about must be doing me well. Actually, this is very local to me because I'm living just over in the Aria buildings over there. I wanted to live downtown and really get into the community here. So it's great to see so many people and so many friendly faces here. One thing with museums, we're nothing if not storytellers. So I thought I'd tell the story of how someone with this accent ended up in Bradenton running the museum. So I'm going to take you on a little bit of a tour through my career with some interesting stories about places I've worked, and then tell you a little bit about what's going on at the Bishop and give you some updates on things we got going on over there. So this is my hometown. This is Boston in England. Many of you may not know there is a Boston in England, but it's actually where the people who founded Boston, Massachusetts came from. If I hadn't gone all transatlantic and BBC in the way I speak, so people can understand me in New Jersey diners, my actual local accent is very similar to a Massachusetts accent. The people in Boston, we have long vowels in the way we speak, and it's still carried over all these hundreds of years later. But actually the town of Boston, Massachusetts, or the city of Boston, Massachusetts, was founded by the vicar of that church in the picture there, a guy called Reverend John Cotton. And you'll see, in fact, like the Boston Latin School in Massachusetts is a copy of my old high school in England that was built in the 1300s. So if ever you watch Harry Potter and you see Hogwarts, my school library had turrets and had stained glass windows and things like that. But I lived in a very, very historic town. It was the biggest, second largest port in the medieval period after London, and was trading over with Holland, was very rich, which is why we could afford the largest parish church in England there. And if you can see a little pub tucked away, a little white building near the bridge, that's supposedly the most photographed pub in England, because if you want a photograph of the church, that's the only place you can get a clear view of it. So the pub is in everybody's photos. So I somehow fell into working in museums. I was actually wanting to be a journalist. My school teachers wanted me to be a German teacher. I wanted to be a journalist, and when I went for an interview with a training agency to get a trainee journalist job, they said, well, at the end of my interview, you absolutely would make a great journalist, but we've got this job at the local museum that no one is ever interested in, and you sound like you'd be interested in it. Would you like to go for an interview? So I went for an interview, and it just sounded like the most amazing, interesting job ever. So I thought, well, it's only for a year. What could be the harm in that? And 32 years later, I'm still figuring out what the harm was in it. So this is my first museum, Boston Guildhall Museum, built in 1450. This was the town museum. back in my hometown. A local history museum, had a little bit of absolutely everything, but was all telling the story of my hometown. It was interesting. We had the imagery of the Pilgrims came up while we were doing the introductions at the beginning. One of the famous stories about Boston, and it says a lot about our personalities from my hometown, is that the Pilgrim Fathers, or who became the Pilgrim Fathers, attempted to leave the country for Holland from Boston. So the people of Boston not only rented them a boat to get to Holland, knowing it was illegal to do so, they also went to the authorities and told them they were trying to leave, so they got the reward for them being arrested as well. So one of the famous elements of Boston Guildhall is that includes and houses the cells and the court that the Pilgrim Fathers, William Bradford, William Brewster, and a bunch of their group were held in for a short period when they first attempted to leave the country. They actually then left, got to Holland, and then famously from Holland tried to get over to the US, stopped in Plymouth along the way. But our local soccer team back in Boston, their nickname is the Pilgrims. And you'll see roads like Mayflower Road. In fact, their ground is the Mayflower ground they used to play at. So I worked there for 2 years, realized I actually quite enjoyed this for a job because it's never been the same day twice in my industry. So I went off to college. I studied museum studies for both my bachelor's degree and my master's degree, which is pretty rare, especially over here. And I was fully qualified. I'd worked as an assistant curator there, and I got my first job out of college at this absolutely amazing place. And I put a couple of pictures in here because this is just such a fascinating story. It's a little museum called True's Yard in the town of Kings Lynn, which is opposite. Boston's built on an estuary, and this is the other side of the estuary where the rival fishing industry was housed. This used to be a general store, this building, but it was in this small little grid of 5 streets where everybody who worked in the fishing industry in Kings Lynn lived and went to the docks from for about 350 years. This was the local store for that little community, and the people who owned it, they worked up until their late 80s. When they died, nobody to take it over. So they went into the back of the store, they went into their yard where they had built this big warehouse attached to the back of it, and they found that they had built their warehouse over these 2 cottages, which are the only 2 cottages surviving from that entire community, because all of these were deemed slums, and in the late 1800s, early 1900s, to help with public health, all the slums were cleared in Britain. They realized way back then that this part of history, which was very important, was going to be lost. So they just built a warehouse over the top of it and hid them. A group of people, it was a fantastic, fantastic story. The other funny thing is the person who actually founded the group to make this a museum, she got interested in it because she was interested in the history of knitting. And she found a bunch of old photos of all the fishermen in what they call ganzes, these very tightly knitted, waterproof sweaters they would wear, and realized that they all wore different patterns to represent each family, and started doing the research into that. So they had this incredible archive and this incredible story to tell. And they did this research and opened this museum, and it was basically a museum of 5 streets, 350 years of history of 5 streets in this little town. And if you see, these are the houses after they were restored. They were even able to find photos of the people who lived in them back when they were still lived in. They had the history pretty much of every house in that district and everybody who ever lived in it and what they all did. Absolutely fantastic place to work. The problem was my pay at that museum was dependent on how good a day we'd had in the donations box. So it was, if someone had come in and been very generous, I had enough money to get my gas for the drive home. But I kind of went from the sublime to the ridiculous when I went to the National Railway Museum, the largest railroad museum in the world, one of the largest transport museums in the world. This would be equivalent to the Air and Space Museum, pretty much, of the Smithsonian. This was part of the Science Museum group. This was, if you've been to the Air and Space Museum in DC, imagine that 2 of those either side of the road, one either side of the road, that was the National Railway Museum. The railways are fascinating part of world history, really interesting part of British history. And they drove so much of what we understand about the world today. I mean, you look at the history of Florida. The history of Florida in the modern era all relies on Henry Flagler and the railroads coming down here, and all of the towns and cities, kind of all the industries as well, really depend on the railroads being there. So this was an absolutely fantastic museum. I think we had on display 144 steam locomotives. We had about 80 pieces of rolling stock, and that represented probably a third of what we actually had in the collection. This had a very important anniversary. I think it was 60 years a few days ago. This is Mallard, LNER A44468, as we yet to call it. This still holds the record for the fastest steam locomotive ever. Reached 126 miles an hour on a very contrived route that it was taking to allow it to be the fastest steam locomotive ever. It nearly blew itself up. They found the only piece of track that was dead straight and that just enough of an incline downhill to not be breaking the rules. And it ran for about 4 miles at that speed. But it does still hold the record, and it was a beautiful thing. You can imagine when you're working, I mean, one of the joys of my industry is that I had to walk past that every day to get back to my office. It's like multiple times a day, you just walk past this hall of these absolute giants, and you just realize what an amazing thing it was. This was the job where I learned never to be scared by anything. I was the assistant curator of photographs and film collections, sorry. There was myself, my boss, the curator, and we had an assistant who helped us with orders. You could actually ask for any of our negatives in our collection to be printed and get a print of a historic photograph. But between the three of us, we oversaw a collection of 1.75 million photographs. We had 4 negative stores, probably the floor plan of this building, just filled with negatives. And we had glass plate negatives dating back into the mid-19th century, all the way up from like 3 foot by 4 foot glass plate negatives down to daguerreotypes and ambrotypes, some of the earliest photographs known in the world, not just the railway photographs. If you want a little interesting railroad fact, is the development of photography was driven by the development of the railroads, because all the amateur photographers, the way they judged each other and their skills was how well they could capture in still frame fast moving objects. And the fastest moving objects for a long time were steam locomotives. So the whole driving of the technology of faster and faster photo speeds was all the railway photographers were figuring out how to do it and who could capture a still image of the fastest train. And just a little funny tidbit I brought in. I went back there about 6 years ago, and they'd reconfigured all the negative stores. And I was actually able to go in with my old boss, who finally retired a few weeks ago. That was the first day of the first work I did on my first day. Peckett negative 001001. For the first month I was there, I did nothing but take those glass plate negatives out of old railroad boxes, the boxes they were held in by the company, clean them up with a brush, put them into those paper enclosures, and put them into those drawers. So I actually went back and was able to pinpoint the exact first job I ever did at that museum and find them again. And that was a lot of my job, was doing that with things there. So, while I was there, I got really interested not just in being a curator, but in how the big projects worked. I was very lucky. I had a very progressive team to work with there. And they saw something in me and put me in charge of a lot of projects. So I wasn't just working as a curator, but I got to go all around Europe managing some European Union funded projects that were museum-wide. And I worked with the National Railway Museums in Hungary and Sweden and Finland and Spain and Ireland. Did a lot of work. We worked with the Japanese railroads as well. But I realized I wanted to get into administration, and I enjoyed actually pulling together the big projects and not just managing the objects. So I got the opportunity to go and become the director at another local history to me. This is Ascafie Hall. I think they were giving the job to anybody who could actually spell Ascafee, because Ayskoughfee, Ascafee. Another medieval building. Again, I had stained glass windows in my office, and it was also a historic garden. But an amazing building in the town of Spalding, which is just about 20 miles away from where I was from. Absolutely amazing place to work. Was the local tourist center as well. The problem for me was, I think a week after I arrived, they found out they had got funding to do a complete restoration and renovation of the building. So my first year there was spent just closing the place down. And then I spent about 6 months writing their reopening plan, their reinterpretation plan. But around the same time, I also got the opportunity to move to the US. So I came over here. I wasn't really sure what my career would hold coming over here. And I thought, well, I moved over to northern New Jersey, and I thought, well, maybe I'll end up working in New York, working at one of the big museums there. I actually ended up working at the historic house that was 5 miles down the road from me, which is the Hermitage, which is a 18th century building. It was a national historic landmark. It's a New Jersey State Park. Really, really interesting story that came back to prominence when the musical Hamilton came out, because this is where Aaron Burr met Theodosia Provost, who became his wife, and Aaron Burr lived here for a few years, and this is where he was married. But a really interesting little story where in its last 60, 70 years was lived in by a couple of old ladies, sisters, and their nurse, who were the last generation of the family that had owned the house, and they refused to leave. They refused to get electricity installed. When they actually died and people came in to look at the house, the entire basement was full of ash from the furnaces that they'd just been putting down there. It was an absolute health hazard to be around there. But they had always told people that they had left it to the state and the state had agreed to take it, and no one could find the documentation. And it sat for 2 years with nobody knowing what to do with it. It was only when there were a lot of break-ins and people started to take things from it that a group of local volunteers went in and tried to clean things up, and found in a book the letters from the state saying, we accept this, and the state had no choice but to take it. So it became, a local group founded called the Friends of the Hermitage, and it became a museum and education center. I was there for about 2 years figuring out how things were different, and it was easy. I can tell you in one word why I think how the museum industry is different in the States compared to back home, and that's fundraising. Because we get all our money from the government back home. We are all funded by taxpayers. All of my jobs in England were either national or local government. So I moved from there to another small museum. This was the Museum of Early Trades and Crafts in Madison. It was about early American industrial history. That actually was the town library that was built for them. And when the library moved to a modern building, that was gifted to the museum to make its home, which was interesting because they actually had all these amazing cast iron bookcases in there that they'd converted into the exhibit cases. So I was there about a year or so, but I was yearning to get back into larger museums. So that brought me to Florida. So 2008, fall of 2008, I moved to Orlando. Never really my intention to end up in Florida, but somehow I've stuck around for a while. So I was at the Orange County Regional History Center. That's the old courthouse downtown in Orlando. The statue of Bunk Baxter, the alligator wrestler, is from a photograph we had, pretty much in the same location. He used to, when it was a small cowboy town or cowman town as they called them, and was just starting to grow, he would come out and wrestle alligators for money from people coming out of bars. So we put that in the entrance there. Really cool museum. It's the county's museum, even though it's in the heart of Orlando, and tells the story of Orange County. I got to do some really, really amazing things there. They were a Smithsonian affiliate, as is the Bishop, and I've worked with Smithsonian affiliates ever since, which is a real feather in the cap of the community to have a Smithsonian affiliate in its backyard. Because we got to access some of their exhibits, a lot of their speakers, a lot of their collections. We had some amazing people come to the museum. And I think the celebrity I met, who I think was I probably don't know I'm ever going to beat this as meeting a celebrity. We had the Jim Henson exhibit, Jim Henson's Fantastic World. You may not know, but there is only ever one Kermit. He always travels with his puppeteer, and you have to get special permission to be photographed with him. And because I'd managed that exhibit going in, we had then Steve Whitmire coming in, and he brought Kermit with him to do a Q&A at the museum. No one was allowed to take photographs of it. But funny story is that night, that evening, they came in, we were like taking them out for dinner. So I was at the Thai restaurant downtown Orlando, and the actual Kermit was in a rucksack under my chair because they couldn't be seen with him. In case anyone recognized him, he might guess what was in the bag. So they had to keep him safe by giving him to me to look after. And I really threw myself into being in Florida. For some reason, as was said, I'm all into sports. I'd grown up around motor racing back home, and I started going to the local stock car track. And I have no idea why, but a bunch of the drivers out there thought it'd be hilarious to stick a British museum director in a stock car. So I spent 3 years racing stock cars out in Daytona, in Orlando. Raced in Daytona, raced at New Smyrna, raced at Auburndale. So I did that for a few years and really got into it. But then I got the opportunity to go to what's kind of been my signature job, which was the Museum of Arts and Sciences in Daytona. Most of my time there was spent doing construction projects. We did a lot of expansion over there. We rebuilt a lot over at the museum. To give you an idea of how much it changed in the nearly 10 years I was there, that's the entrance pretty much on the day I walked in, and that was the entrance we built by the end we were there. We actually renovated about 80,000 square feet, renovated or rebuilt 80,000 square feet of the museum. I actually worked out once how much a day I'd cost them to be their director, because we spent about $35 million in reconstruction and renovations while I was there. But we rebuilt pretty much all of the museum. And we also, funny story, my first weeks, my first days in museums have always been pretty dynamic. So on the day I started at MOAS, I was sat down in my new office. My board president walked in and said, there's something we didn't tell you during the interview, but on Thursday you're announcing we're building a $15 million art museum, and we figured you'd know how to do that. So would you be interested? So can you just start figuring out how to build an art museum, please? Well, we did. We built the C.C. and Hyatt Brown Museum of Art, hosting the largest collection of Florida paintings in the world. They have a collection of about 2,800 Florida paintings, not by Florida artists, but by artists, like world-famous artists who came to Florida and painted, particularly because they loved the sunsets, and they loved the skies, and they loved the variety of animals and landscapes they saw here. So we built that. That opened 3 years into my time there, and is the second building on their campus. And by the time I left, we'd also built the new planetarium, even though it's not actually where that sign is. It fools everybody, because once you go inside, you don't realize where you are. So we had this big auditorium that just looked pretty ugly, so we built a circular wall around it and pretended it was the planetarium. The planetarium's actually tucked away at the back of the building, but nobody can tell the difference. That was actually the last thing I did, was pretty much my final month at MOAS after nearly 10 years, was to open that building. But after 10 years, I'd kind of done my time. As you know, Daytona's a pretty unique community. Now imagine how unique it is to open a fine art museum there. So at 10 years, I think I'd done I always just refer to them as dog years I did in Daytona. So I moved on. I just went back up north again. I got the opportunity to go up to the Morris Museum in New Jersey, in Morristown, New Jersey. Oversaw them for a year or so. They got their reaccreditation with the American Alliance of Museums. But then the opportunity to come back down to Florida came knocking, and the Bishop Museum were interested in having me come down. I'd known the museum for a long time. I'd known this community for a long time because I'd been good friends with Brennan Bazzaio on the Florida Association of Museums board. So I'd been over here a lot. This is such a hotbed of arts and culture over on this coast. So I knew the museum very well, and it was very interesting to me to want to come back. So this March I came back to what is now my 15th year in Florida, took over at the Bishop. So what are we going to be doing at the Bishop? Well, it's really, I'm just kind of trying to give the community what they want the Bishop to be. Obviously, education is the core of what we do. With the Mosaic Backyard Universe we have, that's one of our Tales Under the Tree programs. very, very popular. The absolute heart of what we do is the education programming. We're very excited. We just have a new director of learning who's running our education programming, has just come down. Don't tell anyone, but I actually stole her from the Morris Museum, and she's relocated, and she lives over there now with her husband as well. And she's very happy to be here. If you get to see Gabby, she's absolutely fantastic. But a lot of education programs going on. Still putting a lot of exhibits together, lots of exhibits going in. This is the one that's running currently, Eco-Engineers, which is about how the animal kingdom, particularly in Florida, solve engineering problems. One of the things you'll notice is a commitment the museum made a few years ago, is everything new we install is always bilingual as well. So everything's in English and in Spanish that we do, because we have such a large Spanish-speaking population here. And all I hear about whenever I say I'm from the bishop, and Mike is going to recognize this straight away, is I used to go to laser light shows. Well, they are back, and we've doubled the amount we're doing now, and it's not just Pink Floyd anymore. The laser light shows, this is all the different acts that are there. In fact, I was amazed 2 weeks ago, we had the Beastie Boys and Nirvana. Both were absolutely packed, and there was more singing at them than any I've ever seen. So laser lights are on now, running through to Labor Day weekend. If you go to our website, you can find tickets there, but they are absolutely fantastic. The other thing, we wouldn't be the Bishop Museum without are manatees. And if you haven't been to meet them yet, meet Ripkin and Toba. They're our current little boys, both somewhere in the 400-pound range. It is amazing to watch them grow and how quickly they grow. Toba, the one at the back, he was found at 44 pounds. He was probably only days old and had already been separated from his mother. He is well into the 400s now, about 18 months later. They both have to get up to about 600 pounds or over 600 pounds, which right now I don't think they're going to have problems with. And then we have to wait till it's a cold weather event, and then we can release them into the warm waters where they will learn that that's where they need to be if they get a little bit cold. But they are amazing. They've got amazing personalities. They are also eating us out of house and home. We are now on 3 deliveries a week of lettuce for them, of top grade restaurant quality lettuce. Signing those checks is giving me rider's cramp for their lettuce orders every week. And the funny thing with them is they're meant to eat between 15 and 18% of their body weight. These two now, with just them in the pool, they are eating about 20 to 22% of their body weight a day in lettuce. They're eating 80 to 100 pounds of lettuce a day. And a funny story, if you've ever been in our boardroom, you know there's the window into the manatee habitat. We had a board meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I was telling the story of just how they're having a few tummy problems because they don't know when to stop, and they just keep eating and they keep eating, and then we catch them during the day. Ripkin, Toba on the left, he does lots of spins and just circles round and round the pool trying to work it out of him. And Ripkin will drop down straight and then do abdominal crunches and pull his tummy up, trying to work it out of himself when they're getting a little bit extra gassy. And I was telling this story to the board about why in our budget numbers and in our finance report, we've slightly overspent on lettuce so far this year. And as I'm doing it, Ripkin on the right with the scars comes barreling towards the window with one lettuce tucked under one of his flippers and another he's shoving in his mouth as he's coming towards me. Literally, there's no one else who's having their food, but he's grabbing it and swimming around with it so he doesn't lose out on it. This is just from a couple of weeks ago. This is, again, how we're trying to work with our community. This is the Soaring 4 event. This can get up to 2,500 kids and their families coming to the museum. This was last week where MCR Health were out doing health screenings. We had dental screenings. We had school backpacks being given away. Absolutely fantastic. The museum was absolutely packed. And it's fantastic to be able to work with community partners like that to really be making a difference. One of the things I've learned working in Florida is that Florida, every city and every community in Florida is very, very different. And particularly one where you've got a lot of different communities all locked together here, learning what Bradenton is like, different to the other to Sarasota and to Tampa and to St. Pete, and what Bradenton needs us to be is absolutely core to how we're going to move forward as the bishop. And things like Soaring Force show us what our need is to be in this community. But one of the other big attractions to the community, as you probably already heard, is I love being back in a town that's got a minor league baseball team. I was a big Daytona Tortugas fan. Craig, the general manager, he allows me to wear my Tortugas gear when they're in town, and I can wear my Daytona jerseys when they're in town. But the rest of the time I've got to be a Marauders fan, so I got the opportunity to throw the first pitch out a few weeks ago. And last and definitely not least, you have a real driving force in the museum in Bonnie, of representing the interests of the Kiwanis and making sure that I know all about the work you do. And I know you've got a long, fruitful relationship with us all. But she has been very insistent that one of the things we needed to get done right from the get-go is to thank you for your sponsorship of the classrooms that went into the MBU, into the Mosaic Backyard Universe. And your signs are now very much up in the museum. And right now, one of those spaces is being used as a cool-down space for, we're finding kids in this weather are getting a little bit overheated and their parents are getting a little bit frazzled. So we've actually been using some of our temporary classroom spaces as cool-down rooms and quiet rooms. And the signs are now very much up on there, thanking you for your support of the bishop in the past, in the present, and in all the years to come. And I look forward to working with you all as we make the bishop what it needs to be. Thank you all so much. Yeah. They do. Now they eat 3 types of lettuce, so we have to keep them interested, and they will eat sweet potatoes and carrots. But out in the wild, what we want them to do is never get dependent on one particular type of food. They've got to get used to, just because like they really have favorites. Sometimes they'll turn their nose up at endive and only eat iceberg. So we have to get them used to it. And then as we actually have a license where we can go and pick seagrass and water hyacinth and things like that and actually get them used to eating natural food. But they are super efficient with their digestive systems. They extract every last mineral. That's why they can stay out in brackish and in salt water, is because they can extract so much moisture from the lettuce they don't need to drink. It's only when they get dehydrated they will come inland and find the fresh water and actually drink in the fresh water. But they are, I can't remember, can you remember, Bonnie, how many feet of intestine they have? It's like incredible. It's like 70, 80 feet of intestine coiled up inside themselves that just extracts every last nutrient out of the lettuce they eat. Yeah.
So when you let them out into the wild, you said you let them into a place where there's warm water
Yeah.
during cold weather. Is there any place like that here? Because I know up in Crystal River, there are a lot of manatees there. Do you know where?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on which manatee. So what we try to do, so the reason we do that is because these are both orphans, and we generally look after orphan calves because we have a smaller pool. So they never did a winter with their mothers to learn where to go when they get cold, so they would just be stranded. So what we do is we basically find whichever is the closest warm water site to where they were found. So I think, is it Apollo Beach? There's a power plant there. So some of them I think the plan with these two is probably they'll go there because they were both found close by. But the vets will try and work out which would have been the warm water site their parents would have taken them to, and get them to that one. But some of our manatees, there's a whole community. I refer to them as having a draft board. It's like watching your depth chart of where all the manatees are and who can take them in the state. And every Monday they call and talk about which new manatees are in, which are close to being released, who's got what and where. So they try and get them being rehabbed close to where they're from. But we could be taking, like what I saw, a manatee was just found in Ponce Inlet in Volusia County. I mean, that will probably come over to SeaWorld. And if no one else had space for it, like we're just about to open a new facility in Miyaka that will have space for about another 12 to 18 manatees for rehab. If that had nowhere else to go, we would take that one from Volusia County. Manatees can actually stay out of water long enough to be trucked up to Ohio or to Georgia. They can actually, as long as they're wet down, they can keep breathing, and they can be taken that far. So they can be moved anywhere around the state, really. Yeah.
How do you feel social media, digital media is going to affect the future of museums and exhibits and curation?
It is already taking over all of that. It's funny, we did a thing when I worked in Daytona. We tried to prove a point to the board about how we could do things on social media. And when we just put a lot of our advertising dollars for certain things onto social media and how smart social media is at finding people, we were getting higher attendances at things that had no traditional advertising. We'd just done as targeted posts on things like Facebook. It can be a fantastic way, and it is growing as a way of understanding, particularly as a curator, of understanding objects and stories and storytelling. But the one thing we've got, and we are doomed if it ever goes away, is nothing can beat actually standing and looking at the real thing. And that's for historic sites, for historic objects, for the manatees. I could give you a live stream of the manatees right now from our security cameras, and nothing will be the same as you actually standing in the rehab facility and looking at them. So it's a fantastic tool for us to use and to reach bigger audiences, but nothing ever beats this. I mean, look, that's one of the joys of my job, is having the actual Kermit sitting on my shoulder. I remember when I was at college, I did some work at York Minster, the big cathedral in York, one of the largest cities in England. And we were all trained, curators at the time. So we were just walking around, and the librarian said, "Oh, can you hand me that book?" And I picked up this book and handed it to him, and he showed me it, and it was a book given to one of the priests by King Henry VIII, signed by Henry VIII. And you're just like, oh, okay, I'm just holding a book Henry VIII had. Okay, that's normal, that's my day, You can never get away from that, and the day that loses its uniqueness, I think we're in trouble.
All right, as Bradenton Kiwanis tradition, we'd like to thank you for a great entertaining program today and provide you with our Bradenton Kiwanis rulers, a better way of life, a better Bradenton for your future success at the Bishop.
Thank you so much.
All right, last reminder, tomorrow, open house, 3:30 here downstairs for the Manatee River Kiwanis Club. Open house. Next week, we will have Camille Klein from the Loveland Center, and I hope everybody has a great week. We are adjourned.
Thank you.